My name is Camille Walker, 34 years old today. Sitting alone at this elegant restaurant, I stare at the empty chairs around me, a table for 6 with only one occupant. My birthday champagne tastes bitter as I check my phone again. No new messages from James, my husband of 5 years. My sister Sophie's excuse came hours ago. Even Amanda, my best friend since college, couldn't make it. Funny how they all had different reasons, but were probably at the same place. As I sip my champagne, trying not to cry, the waiter approaches with a small folded note. Before I tell you what was in that note, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you want to see how I turned this betrayal into the most satisfying revenge. The journey from heartbreak to freedom is worth every second, I promise. I met James Taylor at an art gallery downtown. It was one of those chance encounters that romance novels are made of. He reached for the same exhibition pamphlet I was grabbing, our fingers touched, and when I looked up, I was staring into the warmest brown eyes I'd ever seen. The gallery was showcasing modern abstract art, and we spent hours discussing our interpretations of each piece, laughing at how differently we saw the world. "That one looks like a cat chasing its tail," I said, pointing to a swirl of blue and green. "Are you kidding? It's clearly a man drowning in paperwork." He responded with a playful grin that made my heart skip. We exchanged numbers, and by the next morning he had already texted to ask me out for coffee. Our relationship moved quickly after that. Within weeks we were inseparable. James was everything I wanted: intelligent, kind, ambitious, and so attentive. He remembered little details about things I mentioned in passing and surprised me with thoughtful gifts that showed how well he listened. 8 months into our relationship, James took me back to that same gallery where we first met. As we stood in front of the spot where we had reached for the same pamphlet, he dropped to one knee. The ring was perfect, a vintage oval diamond set in white gold, exactly what I had casually mentioned liking months earlier. "Camille, meeting you changed everything. I never want to spend another day without you." "Will you marry me?" I cried, said yes, and the applause from strangers around us made the moment even more magical. We called our families immediately, and my little sister Sophie squealed so loudly over the phone I had to hold it away from my ear. Our wedding was everything I'd dreamed of since I was a little girl. We held it at a restored farmhouse with fairy lights strung across the old wooden beams, wildflowers in mason jars, and my grandmother's lace tablecloths. My father, with tears in his eyes, walked me down the aisle. As James watched with such love, it made my heart ache with happiness. Sophie, as my maid of honour, gave the most touching speech about our childhood and how she always looked up to me. At 24, 3 years younger than I was at the time, she was still figuring out her path in life, but our bond had always been unbreakable, or so I thought. "My big sister Camille has always been my hero," Sophie said during her toast, her voice cracking with emotion. "She taught me how to read, how to stand up to bullies, and how to put on eyeliner without poking my eye out. James, you're getting not just a wife today, but the most loyal, loving person I've ever known. Take care of her heart." Amanda, my best friend since freshman year of college, and my other bridesmaid, had been my rock through everything. She was there during my first heartbreak in college, when I failed a crucial exam for my degree, and when I got my first big promotion. Her toast had everyone laughing and crying in equal measure. "I've watched Camille kiss a lot of frogs," she said, winking at me as the guests laughed. "But James, you are definitely the prince in this fairy tale. You bring out the best in each other, and that's all any of us could hope for our best friends." The first 5 years of our marriage were blissful. We bought a beautiful colonial-style house in a quiet neighbourhood with a backyard big enough for the children we planned to have soon. James's architecture firm was growing steadily, and my marketing career was taking off. We travelled to Italy for our 3rd anniversary, spent weekends fixing up our home, and hosted dinner parties for our friends and family. Sophie was a regular visitor, often staying with us on weekends when she was between apartments or jobs. James always welcomed her warmly, treating her like the little sister he never had. They bonded over their shared love of sci-fi movies and spicy food, things I never particularly enjoyed. I was happy they got along so well. Amanda remained a constant in our lives too, joining us for our standing monthly game nights and annual camping trips. Our social circle expanded, but the four of us, James, Sophie, Amanda, and I, remained the core. We celebrated holidays together, helped each other through rough patches, and shared our dreams over countless bottles of wine. I believed I had everything: a loving husband, a close relationship with my sister, a loyal best friend, and a fulfilling career. I trusted them all implicitly. There were moments of pure joy that I can still recall perfectly. James surprising me with breakfast in bed on random Sundays, Sophie and I laughing until we cried while reminiscing about our childhood misadventures, Amanda and I running a half marathon together and collapsing in exhausted triumph at the finish line. Life wasn't perfect, of course. James and I had our arguments about whose turn it was to do the dishes, or whether we should spend money on renovating the kitchen or taking another vacation. But these were normal disagreements that ended with compromises and make-up kisses. "We're solid," James would say, whenever we worked through a disagreement. "The best teams don't always agree, but they always figure it out together." I believed him. I believed in us. I had no idea that all these moments of happiness were built on shifting sand, and the tide was already coming in to wash it all away. The changes were subtle at first, so gradual that I almost didn't notice them. It started with James's schedule becoming increasingly unpredictable. His architecture firm was taking on more projects which he said required longer hours and more frequent client meetings in the evenings. "Big project for that new shopping complex," he'd explain, kissing me quickly on his way out the door. "Don't wait up, I might be really late." 1 month turned into 3, and these late nights became the norm rather than the exception. When he did come home, he'd head straight for the shower before even greeting me properly. If I mentioned it, he'd blame exhaustion or stress, promising things would calm down soon. They never did. Then there was Sophie, who suddenly developed an intense interest in our home maintenance. She'd call and ask if she could stop by to water our plants or check the mail when we were both out. "You know I've always loved your house," she explained with a casual shrug when I questioned her unexpected visits. "Besides, I'm between jobs again and keeping busy helps me not spiral. You're doing me a favour letting me play house for a bit." It seemed innocent enough. Sophie had always been a bit aimless compared to me, bouncing between jobs and relationships, without finding her footing. If helping around our house gave her some purpose, who was I to question it? Still, it struck me as odd that she often came over when James was home, but I was working late or when I had plans with other friends. Amanda's behaviour shifted too. Our weekly coffee dates became monthly, then sporadic at best. She dodged my invitations with increasingly elaborate excuses. "I've got this deadline," or "I promised my mum I'd help her reorganise her closet," or "I'm coming down with something and don't want to get you sick." We had been friends for over 15 years, sharing everything from romantic disasters to career triumphs. Now she seemed to flinch whenever I tried to confide in her about the growing distance I felt with James. "Marriages go through phases," she'd say dismissively. "James adores you. Don't create problems where there aren't any." That summer, I landed a major project at work: rebranding a national retail chain that would put my name on the map in marketing circles. The timing seemed perfect. James was busy with his architectural projects, and my new responsibilities gave me a focus beyond the growing emptiness at home. 14-hour workdays meant I had little energy to dwell on why my husband no longer looked me in the eye during our increasingly rare conversations. One night, I came home unexpectedly early after a client cancelled our dinner meeting. The house was dark, but James's car was in the driveway. As I approached our bedroom, I heard him speaking in hushed tones on the phone. "I can't talk now. No, she thinks I'm working late. I know I miss you too. Soon, I promise." He hung up quickly when I pushed the door open, fumbling with his phone as if trying to hide it. "You're home early," he said, his voice oddly strained. "Client cancelled," I replied, watching his face carefully. "Who were you talking to?" "Just Dave from work, going over some revisions for the Johnson project." Dave, his colleague whom I'd met several times at company functions. It could have been true, but something in James's eyes, a flicker of panic quickly masked, planted the first real seed of doubt. After that night, I started noticing other things, receipts from restaurants we'd never visited together. Tucked into his pocket, a faint scent of unfamiliar perfume on his shirts, text notifications that he'd quickly dismiss when I walked into the room. One afternoon, while doing laundry, I found a small velvet jewellery box hidden in the pocket of his suit jacket. My heart raced, thinking perhaps he was planning a surprise for our upcoming anniversary. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a small star charm, simple but elegant. Not my style at all, but exactly the kind of minimalist jewellery Sophie always wore. "Must be for his mother's birthday next month," I told myself, even as a cold feeling spread through my chest. I put it back exactly as I found it and tried to forget about it. A week later, Sophie came over for dinner. As she helped me chop vegetables for the salad, I noticed a familiar silver bracelet with a star charm dangling from her wrist. "That's pretty," I said, my mouth suddenly dry. "Is it new?" "Oh, this." She twisted it on her wrist, not quite meeting my eyes. "Just something I picked up at that little boutique downtown. You know, me can't resist shiny things." Later that same evening, I overheard Sophie asking James about his schedule for the coming week. "Are you still going to that conference in Chicago?" she asked, her voice carefully casual. "Yeah, leaving Thursday morning, back Sunday night," he replied. I frowned, trying to remember him mentioning any conference. When I asked about it later, he seemed irritated by the question. "I told you weeks ago, Camille, it's the Sustainable Urban Development Symposium. It's been on the calendar for months." I checked our shared digital calendar. There was nothing. When I pointed this out, he accused me of not paying attention, too wrapped up in my own work to listen when he talked about his. That night, as he slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and tried to silence the whispers of doubt growing louder in my mind. James, my husband, the man who had promised to love me forever. Sophie, my sister, who had looked up to me her entire life. Amanda, my best friend who knew all my secrets. Could they really be betraying me? Or was I letting work, stress, and insecurity create monsters where there were none? I wanted desperately to believe the latter. But as I turned to look at my husband's sleeping form, the stranger he was becoming, I felt the first real fracture in my heart. The doubt that had taken root continued to grow, forcing its way into every crevice of my life. I couldn't concentrate at work, couldn't sleep through the night, couldn't enjoy the things that once brought me joy. My mind constantly spun with questions, scenarios, and possibilities, none of them good. It was a Tuesday evening when I found the first concrete piece of evidence. James had left his sports coat thrown over a chair after claiming he'd been at a client dinner. As I hung it up, a crumpled receipt fell from the pocket. It was from La Petite Maison, a romantic French bistro across town, a restaurant that had been on my wish list for years, but James had always claimed was too pretentious. The receipt showed dinner for two at 8:30 p.m. the previous Friday, a night he told me he was working late. 2 glasses of champagne, oysters, steak for two, and a chocolate souffle. A $230 dinner that wasn't with me. My hands trembled as I tucked the receipt into my journal, starting what would become a detailed log of discrepancies and suspicious behaviours. It felt paranoid, but I needed to organise my thoughts to determine if I was imagining things or if something truly sinister was happening behind my back. 2 days later, Sophie left her phone at our house after stopping by for an impromptu lunch, something she'd never done before in all the years I'd worked from home. She called from what she said was a friend's phone, asking if I could leave her phone on the porch as she was running late for a job interview and couldn't come inside to get it. I agreed, but before placing it outside, I did something I never thought I would do. I looked at my sister's messages. The betrayal I felt at invading her privacy was nothing compared to what I discovered. There, in a text thread with a contact saved simply as Jay, was a conversation that stopped my heart. Jay, miss you already. Dinner was amazing. Sophie, La Petite Maison was perfect. We should go back after Chicago. Jay, it's a date. Just be careful with your bracelet. C asked about it. Sophie, told her I bought it myself. Don't worry, she suspects nothing. Too busy with work. J 4 more days until Chicago. Can't wait to have you all to myself. I took screenshots, sent them to my email, and placed the phone on the porch as promised, my entire body numb. There was no longer room for doubt or self-gaslighting. The J was James. The bracelet was the one I'd found. The restaurant was the one on the receipt. Chicago was the trip he'd mentioned, a trip that apparently included my sister. The following week, I reached out to Amanda, desperate for someone to talk to someone to help me make sense of this nightmare. Can we get coffee tomorrow? I really need to talk, I texted her. Sorry, swamped at work. Maybe next week, came her quick reply. It was the 4th time she'd turned me down in 2 weeks. In 15 years of friendship, even through her busiest periods, Amanda had never been too busy for an emergency coffee when I needed her. Something wasn't adding up. I tried a different approach the next day. Actually, it's not urgent, just wanted to catch up. How about dinner instead? James is going to be out of town this weekend for that Chicago conference. Her response was telling, oh, I'm actually heading out of town too. Family stuff in Michigan. Amanda had no family in Michigan. Her parents lived in Florida, and her brother was in California. Another lie. I spent that evening creating a detailed timeline of the past 6 months, noting every late night, every cancelled plan, every strange interaction. Patterns emerged that I couldn't ignore. James and Sophie's availability often aligned. Amanda's excuses tended to coincide with times when both James and Sophie were unavailable. The 3 people I trusted most were coordinating their lies, but I needed more than suspicious text messages and aligned calendars. I needed irrefutable proof before I confronted anyone. So I made a decision that still makes me uncomfortable to think about. I hired a private investigator. Mark Stevens was recommended by a colleague who had unfortunately needed his services during her own divorce. He was discreet, thorough, and non-judgmental as I laid out my suspicions. I need to know if my husband is having an affair with my sister and if my best friend is covering for them. I told him, the words burning my throat as I spoke them aloud for the first time. Unfortunately, Mrs. Walker, this kind of betrayal isn't as uncommon as you might think, he said gently. I'll need information about all 3 individuals, their routines, and particularly details about this Chicago trip. I provided everything, photos, addresses, schedules, the works. Mark would follow James to Chicago, document who went with him, and gather whatever evidence he could find. That night, alone in my house, I poured myself a large glass of wine and sat in the dark living room where James and I had once cuddled on the couch, watching movies, where Sophie had crashed on many weekends, where Amanda and I had stayed up late talking about our dreams. The memories felt poisoned now, contaminated by suspicion and the growing certainty that I was being betrayed by everyone I loved. I picked up my phone to check the time and noticed a new email notification. It was from James, sent to my personal account rather than our shared family email. Working late tonight, don't wait up. Love you. At the same moment, a text arrived from Sophie. Super busy with job applications. Catch up next week. Their coordinated communications only confirmed what I already suspected. As I placed my phone down, I caught sight of our wedding photo on the mantel, James and I beaming at each other, Sophie and Amanda flanking us, all of us radiant with happiness and promise. Who are you people? I whispered to their smiling faces. And what have you done with the people I loved? I didn't know then that the answer would be far more devastating than I could imagine, and that a chance encounter the next evening would change everything. While driving home from work, I decided to take a different route, one that happened to pass by Amanda's apartment building. It was an impulse decision born from restlessness and suspicion. As I approached, I slowed down, not even sure what I was looking for. That's when I saw them, James and Amanda, standing close together outside her building, engaged in what appeared to be an intense conversation. I pulled over a block away and watched as Amanda handed James what looked like a small package. He kissed her cheek before they parted ways. Not a romantic encounter, perhaps, but definitely not the behaviour of two people who had supposedly no contact that day. I snapped a quick photo with my phone, adding it to my growing collection of evidence. Later that night, unable to sleep, I heard James's phone buzz on his nightstand. He was in the shower, and I knew his passcode. His father's birthday, unchanged since we first started dating. Another boundary I never thought I'd cross, but desperation had rewritten all my rules. What I found was a group text between James, Sophie, and Amanda, James, everything set for Chicago. Sophie, all packed and ready. Amanda has the hotel confirmation. Amanda got it all arranged. Connecting rooms at the Palmer House. No one will know. James, you're the best. Thanks for covering with Camille. Amanda, what are friends for? Just be careful. She's been asking a lot of questions lately. I put the phone down, my decision confirmed. The private investigator would provide the final pieces, but I already knew the truth. My husband, my sister, and my best friend had formed an alliance against me, weaving a web of deceit so intricate that I'd almost convinced myself I was the crazy one for suspecting anything. As I heard the shower turn off, I quickly retreated to my side of the bed, closed my eyes, and pretended to be asleep. But inside, something had hardened. The hurt was still there, cavernous and raw, but now it was accompanied by something else, a cold determination to uncover every last detail and to make sure that those who had betrayed me would regret ever underestimating Camille Walker. 2 days after James left for Chicago, Mark Stevens called me. "Mrs. Walker, I think you should come to my office. There are things you need to see." His voice was gentle but firm, the tone people use when delivering life-altering news. I knew before I even arrived what he would show me, but nothing could have prepared me for the reality of seeing the evidence spread across his desk. Dozens of photos documented James and Sophie together in Chicago. Not at any conference, but touring the city like lovers on vacation, holding hands along the Navy Pier, kissing by Buckingham Fountain, entering the Palmer House Hotel together, his hand resting possessively on her lower back. The affair has been going on for approximately 7 months based on my investigation. Mark explained, his voice professionally detached as he walked me through his findings. I was able to access their text message history through the methods we discussed. The text messages were worse than the photos, intimate conversations spanning months detailing their affair in excruciating clarity. Messages about how they'd fallen in love, about the future they planned together, about how sorry they were to hurt me, but how they couldn't deny their feelings any longer. "I never meant for this to happen," James had written to Sophie in one message. "But I've never felt this way about anyone, not even when Camille and I first got together." Sophie's reply cut even deeper. "I know it's wrong to love my sister's husband, but I can't help it. We can't keep living a lie. It's not fair to any of us, especially Camille." Mark cleared his throat awkwardly. "There's more. Your friend Amanda has been aware of the relationship for at least 5 months. He showed me screenshots of a group chat between the 3 of them where they coordinated their stories and alibis. Amanda, Camille asked about dinner next Friday. I told her I have a work event. James, perfect. I'll tell her I'm meeting with clients. Sophie, thanks for covering Amanda. I owe you. Amanda, just be careful. She's not stupid. No, I wasn't stupid. Just trusting. Blindly, foolishly trusting. There's something else you should know, Mark said, hesitating before sliding another document toward me. Based on their communications, Mr. Walker appears to be planning to ask for a divorce shortly after your birthday next week. I stared at him, the words not fully registering at first. My birthday? Mark nodded, looking genuinely sorry. From what I can gather, he and your sister are planning to move to Boston. He's applied for a position at an architectural firm there, and they plan to go public with their relationship after he formally ends your marriage. I read the email exchanges Mark had uncovered. James's job application, Sophie's excited messages about apartments they'd looked at online, Amanda's promises to help with the transition, however she could. One more thing, Mark added, pulling out a final report. In preparing for this move, Mr. Walker has been moving funds around. He's withdrawn approximately $47,000 from your joint savings account over the past 3 months, depositing it into a private account under his name only. The room seemed to tilt around me. Not only were they betraying me emotionally, but James was also preparing to leave me financially vulnerable. The completeness of the betrayal was staggering. There's also evidence suggesting that almost everyone in your social circle is aware of the affair, Mark continued, his voice softening slightly. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this. The final blow. Text messages referring to dinner parties where I was the only one not in on the secret. Comments from mutual friends about how to handle the situation. A world of whispers and sidelong glances that had been happening around me while I remained oblivious. I sat there surrounded by evidence of my shattered life, feeling more alone than I ever had. The people I loved most in the world, the ones I would have done anything for, had conspired together not just to betray me, but to humiliate me as well. What do I do now? I asked, my voice barely audible. Mark leaned forward. That's entirely up to you, Mrs. Walker. But if you're asking for my professional advice, I recommend you contact a divorce attorney immediately. Given the evidence we've gathered, including the financial impropriety, you're in a strong position legally. I nodded numbly, gathering the copies of all the evidence into a folder. Thank you, I said as I rose to leave. You've been very thorough. Mrs. Walker, Mark called as I reached the door. For what it's worth, none of this is your fault. Some people just don't deserve the trust placed in them. I managed a small smile, though it felt like my face might crack from the effort. No, they don't, but they do deserve what's coming next. I spent the next 48 hours in a state of almost robotic efficiency. I contacted Patricia Winters, reputed to be the most formidable divorce attorney in the city. I forwarded all of Mark's evidence to her, along with bank statements showing James's withdrawals from our joint accounts. This is one of the more clear-cut cases I've seen, Patricia said after reviewing everything. The infidelity, the financial deception, the conspiracy of silence, it all works strongly in your favor. But Camille, what do you want out of this? What did I want revenge justice? To hurt them as deeply as they had hurt me. I want what's fair, I finally answered. And I want to be the one in control when everything falls apart. Patricia nodded approvingly. Then let's make that happen. Over the next few days, I executed Patricia's advice meticulously. I opened new bank accounts in my name only and transferred half of our remaining joint funds. Completely legal, Patricia assured me, given the circumstances. I gathered all our important documents, marriage certificate, property deeds, investment portfolios, and secured them with Patricia. But the financial preparations were just the beginning. As I dug deeper into our affairs, looking for anything James might try to hide in the divorce, I stumbled upon something unexpected. Emails between James and his business partner discussing creative accounting for several major projects. I forwarded these to Patricia as well, who consulted with a colleague specializing in business law. This looks like potential fraud, she reported back. They appear to be inflating costs to clients and pocketing the difference. If exposed, it could ruin his professional reputation and possibly lead to criminal charges. Another piece of leverage I hadn't expected, but welcomed nonetheless. With my legal and financial positions secured, I turned to the emotional reckoning that awaited. My birthday was approaching, the day James had apparently planned to ask for a divorce. I decided to flip the script entirely. I reserved a table for 6 at La Rivière, the most exclusive restaurant in the city, a place that required reservations months in advance, but had suddenly had an opening when I called. I texted James, Sophie, Amanda, and 2 other close friends, who, according to Mark's investigation, were also aware of the affair. Birthday dinner at La Rivière this Saturday at 8 p.m. No excuses, I'm calling in all my birthday wishes for everyone to be there. It's important to me. The responses came quickly, too quickly, as if they had already discussed how to handle this exact situation. James, of course, babe. Wouldn't miss it. Sophie, I'll be there, so excited to celebrate you, Amanda. Looking forward to it. Liars, all of them. I knew from tracking James's phone location, another suggestion from Mark, that the 3 of them were together when these messages were sent, probably coordinating their next round of deception. I had one final preparation to make. I created individual envelopes for each person I'd invited, containing printed evidence of their specific betrayals. For James, the affair and financial misconduct. For Sophie, her relationship with my husband. For Amanda, her role in covering for them. For the other friends, screenshots of their knowledge and silence. As I sealed the last envelope, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The hurt wasn't gone. It might never be completely gone, but it had transformed into something I could use, rather than something that was using me. On the morning of my birthday, I received the final confirmation from Patricia. All legal preparations were in place, ready to be executed at my signal. I spent extra time getting ready, choosing a black dress that James had always said was too sophisticated for me, styling my hair in a way Sophie had once attempted to copy, but couldn't quite pull off. I looked at myself in the mirror, 34 years old today, standing at the edge of a cliff, preparing to jump, not into darkness, but into my own power. The woman staring back at me wasn't broken, despite their best efforts. Happy birthday, Camille, I whispered to my reflection. Time to blow out the candles on this marriage and make a new wish. La Rivière was bustling with the elegant hum of fine dining, crystal glasses clinking muted conversations, and the subtle notes of a piano playing in the background. I arrived 15 minutes early, watching the maitre d's eyebrows raise slightly when I confirmed my reservation for 6. Just me for now, I explained with a practiced smile. The others will be arriving shortly. He led me to a prime table overlooking the river, the restaurant's namesake, glittering with city lights reflected on its surface. I ordered a bottle of Dom Pérignon, James's favourite champagne that he claimed was too expensive for regular celebrations, and waited. At 7:55, my phone buzzed with a text from James, running about 30 minutes late. Client emergency. Order without me. At 8:05, Sophie. Train delays, should be there by 8:45. So, sorry. At 8:10, Amanda. Flat tire. Waiting for roadside assistance. Save me some cake. By 8:30, my other 2 friends had also sent their excuses. Different words, same lie. I knew exactly where they were. Together at a bar across town, according to the location tracking app I'd installed on James's phone, probably planning how they would handle the aftermath of whatever divorce conversation James had scheduled for later that night. The waiter approached with a sympathetic smile. Would Madame like to order or continue waiting for her party? I'll order now, I said confidently. And please bring the entrees for just one. It seems my guests won't be joining me after all. I ordered extravagantly. The tasting menu with wine pairings, additional truffle shavings on the risotto, the works. If this was to be my last meal as a married woman, I would make it memorable. Other diners occasionally glanced my way. A woman alone at a large table on her birthday was apparently an object of curiosity or pity. I met their gazes, directly refusing to show the slightest hint of embarrassment. This was my choice, my stage, my show. Between the 3rd and 4th courses, Patricia texted me, "Everything is in place. Give the word when you're ready. I replied with a single word, now. As I savoured a perfectly seared scallop, I knew that across town, James's business partner was receiving an anonymous email detailing the accounting irregularities, with copies to their largest clients and the state licensing board. Sophie's boss was getting documentation of how she'd been using company time to plan her affair and relocation. Amanda's boyfriend, who had no idea of her role in this betrayal, was opening an email with select screenshots of her text messages about the affair. The dominoes were falling, but the main event was yet to come. When the dessert arrived, a delicate chocolate soufflé adorned with gold leaf, the waiter placed it before me with a small envelope. "This was left for you earlier today, madame." The envelope contained a simple note from Patricia. "All documents filed. Temporary restraining order granted due to financial impropriety. Locks changed at house. His access to joint accounts frozen. Press release prepared for Monday regarding firm's investigation. It's done." I read it twice, then tucked it away in my purse. The soufflé tasted like victory, bittersweet, rich and satisfying. I took my time savouring each bite, knowing that while I dined in peaceful solitude, their worlds were beginning to collapse. As I sipped the last of my champagne, I pulled out my phone and composed a single group text to James, Sophie, and Amanda. "I know everything. Check your emails. Don't come home. James, your things will be with a storage company. I've taken the liberty of forwarding the hotel confirmation Amanda arranged in Chicago to my lawyer. Happy birthday to me." I attached a photo of myself raising my champagne glass, the half-eaten soufflé in front of me, and their empty chairs visible in the background. Then I did something that surprised even me. I took out the individual envelopes I'd prepared and asked the waiter to dispose of them. I didn't need to hand-deliver the evidence anymore. The legal system, their employers, and the truth would do that work for me. As I signed the considerable check, my phone began buzzing incessantly. Calls from James, texts from Sophie, voice messages from Amanda. I silenced it without looking at any of them. They'd had months of secret conversations. They could wait a few hours for mine. The maitre d' helped me with my coat. "I hope, despite the circumstances, you enjoyed your evening, madame." "Actually," I replied, feeling lighter than I had in months. This was exactly the birthday dinner I needed. As I stepped outside into the cool evening air, a message notification appeared from an unknown number. It was Mark, the private investigator. "Confirming surveillance is complete as requested. All targets received electronic deliveries simultaneously at 9:45 p.m. Reactions were significant. Details in my final report." I smiled to myself, picturing the scene at that bar across town. 3 phones chiming simultaneously, 3 faces draining of colour as they realised their carefully constructed house of cards had just been blown down. The waiter handed me a small box containing the remainder of my soufflé. "For later," he said with a wink. Yes, I thought as I walked to my car, there would definitely be a later. A new beginning disguised as an ending, and for the first time since discovering the betrayal, I was actually looking forward to it. The aftermath was both exactly what I expected and completely surprising. Within hours of my birthday, dinner revelation, my phone had accumulated 47 missed calls, 32 text messages, and 19 voicemails, a digital testament to panic. James alternated between desperate pleas for forgiveness and angry accusations that I'd overreacted and ruined his career. Sophie cycled through tearful apologies and claims that they'd never meant to hurt me and that love can't be controlled. Amanda insisted she'd only been trying to protect everyone involved and had planned to tell me when the time was right. I listened to each message, once read each text, and then blocked them all. Their words were just noise now, meaningless vibrations that couldn't touch me anymore. The professional consequences for James were swift and severe. His firm placed him on administrative leave pending investigation of the financial irregularities. 3 major clients withdrew their projects. His carefully cultivated reputation in architectural circles was in tatters. Sophie was terminated from her job when her employer discovered she'd used company resources to plan her affair and relocation. Amanda's relationship ended spectacularly when her boyfriend learned of her deception. The wider social fallout was equally dramatic, friends taking sides, family members expressing shock and outrage. The comfortable social fabric we'd all existed within shredded beyond repair. I observed it all from a distance, like watching a storm from inside a secure shelter. Patricia handled all communication with James and his hastily hired attorney. The evidence was overwhelming, and even his lawyer admitted privately that fighting the divorce terms would only prolong the inevitable and increase his fees. "He wants to talk to you," Patricia told me during one of our meetings. "Says there are things that can only be said in person." "There's nothing he can say that would matter now," I replied. The time for talking was before he decided to sleep with my sister. 3 weeks after my birthday, the divorce was finalized, record time according to Patricia, due to James's eagerness to settle quickly and quietly before more damage could be done to his professional reputation. I received the house half of his business assets, including his share in the firm, which I promptly sold back to his shocked partners, and a substantial settlement. The legal victory was satisfying, but the emotional aftermath was more complicated. Once the adrenaline of planning and executing my response faded, I was left with the reality of my situation, alone in our house, surrounded by memories and betrayals embedded in every room. Some nights, I'd wake up at 3 a.m., my mind replaying moments from our marriage, searching for clues I'd missed, signs I'd ignored. Had there always been something between James and Sophie? Had Amanda always been disloyal? How much of my life had been genuine, and how much a carefully orchestrated performance? I decided to join a support group for people who had experienced similar betrayals. At my first meeting, sitting in a circle of strangers united by the common thread of deception, I finally allowed myself to cry. Not delicate tears, but ugly, heaving sobs that seemed to come from the very core of my being. "The hardest part," I told the group once I could speak again, "isn't losing them, it's losing my trust in my own judgment. How do I ever trust myself to read people correctly again?" An older woman named Doris, betrayed by her husband of 40 years, reached over and took my hand. "You learn to trust differently, not less, but better, with your eyes wide open." Those words became my mantra in the months that followed. I sold the house, Too Many Ghosts, and bought a sleek downtown apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows that flooded the space with light. I left my marketing job for a competitor who'd been trying to recruit me for years, securing a substantial promotion in the process. I traveled alone for the first time in my adult life. A 2-week trip to Portugal where nobody knew me or my story. Walking along the Atlantic coast, feeling the wind and salt spray on my face, I experienced moments of genuine peace that I hadn't thought possible again. When I returned, I began carefully rebuilding my social circle. I reconnected with old friends from college who had drifted away during my marriage, joined a rock climbing club, where I met people who shared my newfound love of physical challenges, and even started dating casually. Nothing serious, just coffee or dinner with interesting people who made me laugh. 6 months after my birthday dinner, I received an email from Sophie. The subject line read simply, "When you're ready." I almost deleted it unread, but decided that was the response of the old Camille, the one who avoided painful truths. The new Camille could face anything. The email was surprisingly short. "I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, and I'm not. What I did was unforgivable. I've started therapy to understand why I would betray the person who always protected me, always loved me unconditionally. I don't expect a response. I just wanted you to know that losing you was the consequence that hurts the most, and it should be. You deserved better from your sister." Sophie. I didn't respond, but I didn't delete it either. Some wounds needed more than 6 months to heal, if they ever would. Around the same time, I ran into Amanda at a coffee shop. The moment was awkward tense, her face flushing with shame, my body stiffening with remembered anger. Camille, she began, her voice trembling slightly. I know nothing I say matters, but you're right. I interrupted, my voice steady and clear. Nothing you say matters, but I want you to know that I'm doing well, better than well, and I didn't need you for that. I paid for my coffee and left feeling neither triumphant nor vengeful, just free. James I didn't see again until a year after our divorce was finalised. We happened to be at the same industry event, he with his new firm a significant step down from his previous position, me with my new colleagues who had just won an award for a campaign I'd spearheaded. Our eyes met across the room, and for a moment I was afraid I'd feel something. Residual anger, hurt, or worse, longing. Instead, I felt a curious emptiness, as if he were a stranger I'd never really known. He looked smaller somehow, less substantial than the man who had once occupied so much space in my life. He nodded slightly in acknowledgement. I raised my champagne glass in a small toast, not to him, but to my own resilience, and turned back to my conversation. Later that evening, I overheard someone mention that he and Sophie had broken up months ago, unable to build a relationship on the foundation of betrayal they'd created. I found I didn't care enough to confirm whether this was true. On my 35th birthday, exactly 1 year after the dinner that had changed everything, I hosted a small gathering at my new apartment. Just a few close friends I'd made over the past year, people who knew my story but hadn't been part of it. As we toasted with champagne, not Dom Perignon, I'd discovered I preferred Veuve Clicquot. Anyway, my friend Kate asked a question I'd been asked many times that year. Do you regret how you handled it? The public exposure, the professional consequences for them. I considered the question carefully before answering. I regret the circumstances that made it necessary. I regret trusting people who didn't deserve that trust, but I don't regret standing up for myself when no one else would. Later, as the evening wound down and my guests prepared to leave, Kate lingered behind to help clean up. You know what I admire most about you, she said as we loaded the dishwasher. It's not how you handled the betrayal, though, that was pretty badass. It's how you've refused to let it define you. You could have become bitter, suspicious, closed off, and no one would have blamed you. Instead, you've become more authentically yourself. Her words stayed with me long after she left, echoing in my mind as I stood on my balcony, looking out at the city lights. The betrayal had nearly broken me, but in the breaking and rebuilding I'd discovered parts of myself I never knew existed. Strength. I hadn't tested boundaries, I hadn't defined desires, I hadn't acknowledged. The people who had hurt me had taken much, but they hadn't taken everything. They couldn't take my future unless I gave it to them, and I had no intention of giving them anything more. The path from that birthday dinner to today hadn't been straight or easy. There were still days when grief ambushed me, when trust felt impossible, when the unfairness of it all threatened to overwhelm me. But those days grew fewer and farther between, overshadowed by new experiences, new connections, new possibilities. If there was a lesson in all of this, and I believed there had to be for me to make sense of such pain, it was that our value doesn't diminish because someone fails to see it. That betrayal says everything about the betrayer and nothing about the betrayed. That even when we're broken open by those we love, we can choose what grows from the cracks. I hadn't chosen the betrayal, but I had chosen how to respond to it, how to heal from it, and ultimately how to transcend it. In doing so, I'd given myself the most valuable birthday gift possible. Not revenge, though, that had been sweet, but something far more lasting, the knowledge that I was enough, had always been enough, and would continue to be enough with or without them. And that more than anything else was worth celebrating. What was the most shocking betrayal you've ever experienced in your life? How did you handle it? With quiet dignity or blazing revenge? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you found my journey from heartbreak to healing inspiring, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of resilience and redemption. Remember, sometimes the greatest gift in betrayal is discovering your own strength. Thank you for being here with me today.